Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane Groeneveld, and joining me today, I've got Robbie Tombosky. Welcome, Robbie.
Thank you, Dane. It's a pleasure to join you.
We've been doing some pretty fun work today. We were just talking about it before, and over the last few weeks around a few different projects that focus on, teaming up, partnership in the community with a particular bent on wellness for our youth. But maybe you could kick off telling me a little bit more about yourself and sort of how we've come to get to know each other recently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a fantastic opportunity to have a very diverse career, starting out very much in the arena of where wealth and impact meet each other. I really started out in sort of Citigroup and Merrill Lynch in that setting. And our focus was primarily, how do we take people who have a lot of money and resources and they want to leave a legacy, and how do we connect them with projects, opportunities, endowments, trusts, and things that they could fund over time to really make that difference in the world. And that was 28 years ago. And the world's come a long way since then. Yeah, I know. And somewhere along the way, about a decade into it, I realized that I really wanted to be very focused on helping the nonprofits grow and attract the kind of resources and the kind of board leadership that they would have to make impact. Did that for a while. And then I had this sort of really eye-opening event that happened around the horrible incidents around Katrina. And something happened that caught my eye. And I've changed the way that I do work and the way we have impact projects ever since. And that was simply in the aftermath, we found that the entity that had the most impact immediately after Katrina wasn't a governmental agency. It wasn't a nonprofit. You might be surprised to hear this, but it was actually Walmart. Because Walmart had on the ground, they had an army of people, they had distribution, they had the opportunity to have inventory, they understood the local needs, and they had a supply chain that was able to make that difference. And then they brought tremendous value and resources. And to me, that was an eye-opener that organizations that are corporate in nature, that have a diverse set of goals that they're trying to accomplish, can actually do tremendous good in the marketplace. And so for the last number of years, I've been focusing on trying to help corporations, which I would consider are conscious capitalistic organizations that aren't giving up profit, that are making more profit. But when they're looking at their stakeholders around the table, they're not just looking at the stakeholders being potentially investors or potentially being the market as a whole, but there's the environment, their grandchildren, and how they're bettering the lives of the world within which they serve. And so that's where we've met in around this Ambassadors of Compassion program, which is doing just that, doing tremendous things to bring great value to our youth and to the leaders of the future.
Oh, that's really neat, Robbie. 28 years, I hadn't realized it's been that long. That's really doing something to stick with it and to keep finding joy and passion and new learning through that sort of journey that you've been on, and particularly the Walmart story. That's fascinating. I mean, we've come through obviously another big shock, not Katrina, but COVID. And that really changed the way that we team up in businesses, but also in the community, whether it's impact projects or the way companies are reorganizing, re-engineering their business models. And there is a theme out there right now that bundling, partnering, playing the ecosystem is really the way to make positive progress, no matter where you are in sort of the continuum of private business or individual or not for profit. So it's a really good story you've shared. What thinking about the teams that you've been a part of, what does teamwork really mean to you? Where's a good experience of teamwork that's allowed you to kind of go the extra mile, create more impact in one of your initiatives?
That's a great question. To me, teamwork has taken on different meaning throughout my career. And right now, the way I look at teamwork really begins first and foremost with what I would call shared reality. We set the goals sometimes and we say, this is what we want to accomplish. And we share roles and responsibilities, and we have delineation of what it will take to succeed at the goal. When I sometimes enter and a team is not having their best result or their highest function, what I sometimes find is that they've never taken the time to actually come around to shared reality, because we know that perspective is so unique to the individual, right? One of my favorite stories was written by a poet in the 18th century, and his name evades me, but I'll tell you what it is later. And he tells the story of a Native American troop of wise men that are traveling through the outback, so to speak, and they happen upon something that they don't know what it is, and they have to quickly discern, what is this thing that we've come upon? So they are a unique group because they're 6 wise men, but they're all blind. So they're blind wise men, so they don't know what they have happened upon. And so the story goes that they encircle this thing, and the person in front reaches out and he holds on to this, well, it's kind of long and scaly and slithery. And he quickly realizes this must be a snake. And he screams, "Everybody step back. It's a snake. It's a serpent. We're going to die." But the guy in the back reaches out and he's holding on to something that's leathery and is kind of knotty. And he goes, wait, no, it's not a snake. It's not a snake. It's a rope. We're okay. And the guy on the side is pushing against the side of it. And he says, "Hey, wait, no, this isn't a rope. This is like a wall. Whatever this is, it feels like a wall." On the other side, the guy's got his arms around like this thing. And he goes, "No, it's a pillar. I can barely get my arms around the circumference. It's huge." And somebody in the front grabs and is holding on to a flappy long thing. And it feels like maybe a palm. He goes, "No, this is a palm bush." And the other person in the front is holding on to a sharp, pointy item that's protruding from the front. And he goes, no, it's something of a spear. Well, they all come together and they discuss, and then they recognize, obviously, this is an elephant, right? But any one perspective certainly wouldn't have got them to that point. However, I once heard a speaker say something a little bit different, because that's a very famous story in lots of different iterations. And he said the challenge is that if all the people around the elephant only have an elephant in their lexicon to compare it to, so they'll come to the conclusion it's an elephant. But what if it wasn't even an elephant? What if it was some mystical creature that was part serpent and part rope and part wall, part spear and part trunk and part tree? How do they know it wasn't? Well, they never experienced that before. So I think in that experience, one of the most important parts about a team is not only perspective and shared reality and knowing what that is, but potentially also knowing there are things outside of our experience, and we need to have the ability to understand that. So I would say one of the most unique learnings I had in that venue was a gentleman who had actually was one of the founders of Apple Music, and he had many other successes in launching very innovative projects. So he had asked me to join this team and hired me as a consultant, and I would fly up to San Francisco once a week, actually the Bay Area, and he would we'd have these meetings, and afterwards he would debrief for me, and everybody around the table actually had so much experience in this area, and there was very little that I would add other than answering questions he had at the end before I would head back to the airport. And after a while, I was just like, "Jeff, I got to ask you, thank you so much. It's a great engagement. I love you. The team's really nice. Why do you have me here? I don't get it. What am I adding to this equation? I want to make sure I'm bringing value." And so he said, "Well, it's really simple, Robbie. I have you here because you offer perspicacity." And I said, "Thank you."
That's a word.
And then I went to the restroom and I went on my phone and I Googled perspicacity because I didn't know what that meant. But basically what he said was one of the things that he had learned from Steve Jobs early on is if you have everybody around the table has a specific perspective, so then you can get to shared reality, and that's really good for a team. But unfortunately, the reality is going to be dictated by the people around the table. And sometimes when you're in the innovation space or the project management phase or solving big world problems goal, then you have to have people around the table that don't look, sound, or have experiences like anybody else, because then you get to the point of perspicacity. You have a unique perspective at the table. And so whenever we're working on a project for our clients, we always look at who's around the table. We try to get shared reality, so everyone's perspectives are invested in that. But even more so, we make sure there's perspectives at the table that we may not have thought were valuable because they're different than ours. And every single time that adds to the teamwork, because we can now say, maybe that's not an elephant. Maybe that's a magical creature. Let's be sure we know what we're dealing with here.
That's super cool. And I'm adding that word to my glossary here.
There you go.
I think perspicacity. It's a cool sounding word too. I love that viewpoint that you've got on teamwork, which is it's about it's not just about what they output. It's kind of what they can imagine, what they can design for, what they can hope for. Because realistically, and in some of our episodes, we get pretty caught up on the analogy with sports, but realistically, teams achieve a lot, not just, scoring goals and winning games, and driving innovation, I think is an exciting theme, particularly at this time. We've come out of COVID, we've had this acceleration of change, whether it's social change or whether it's technological change. We're seeing a lot of really cool stuff come together, and I think the ability for teams to now form in a way that brings all of those different perspectives and capacity for different perspectives is probably never been easier. So that's a really good call to action.
I appreciate that. Never easier, never more important. Innovation isn't anymore for startups or for the tech world. We live in a world that's changing so rapidly that regardless what part of the economy you're in, there's a need to see things differently than we have in the past. And if we're not doing it for only our business model and for the ability to compete, we have this additional layer, which is a challenge for some companies, but I would see it as a tremendous opportunity, which is the marketplace now demands purpose. So if someone's going to buy your product, if someone's going to work at your company, if someone's going to invest in what you're doing, the question is, do you know your purpose? And are you innovating? So you're not just making carpet or opening restaurants, but you're doing more than that. That's a beginning springboard to where you go. So that collaboration and that shared reality and that innovation is, I think, it's everywhere. It's more important than ever.
Yeah. And purpose, I think, is changing too. We were at a conference recently. Dan Pink spoke to us for the day, and he talked about purpose, big P, little p. I thought it was really cool. He was basically suggesting that, yes, there is the purpose of a company or a purpose of an organization, but individuals deserve their own purpose with a small p too, because we play different roles in teams. And we've also play roles outside of teams, whether it's in our community or in our family or wherever it might be. And this whole concept of, I want to attach myself to a company that has a great purpose, to brands that I consume that have great purpose, and I want to be known in my community for sort of living out this kind of set of values and this idea of where we're trying to go. That is very important, particularly in a world which has become so populated and unfortunately so confusing, conflicted at times with just all of the different agendas that are running around right now on a global basis, and the availability of technology, which kind of means that we're all swamped with lots of different pains and challenges on a daily basis. So where do you see, thinking on that theme, where do you see the role of information, community, social media? Where do you see the role of teams in kind of trying to drive a different agenda there? We all seem to be running into the same brick wall, no matter who you speak to right now. There's a lot of negativity, and we're not really seeing the innovation or the hope that I think we should be experiencing in those community platforms.
Yeah. So I think part of it is coming back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? So, we have human beings generally are very altruistic people. Human beings are also very narcissistic, and not narcissistic in the clinical sense, but narcissistic in the sense that we have needs that need to be met. And it's very hard to get to an altruistic place if those needs aren't met. And the challenge is that I think we marginalize those needs, especially when we are one generation talking to a younger generation in certain ways and maybe belittling the need or the desire to identify and create identity through social media, through my digital communities of purpose that I bring together around things that I care about. Being willing to pay a premium for a brand or an experience from a company that echoes my values and the things I care about most in this world. And so, you have sort of like some like old timers that are like, that's just narcissistic, right? That's not really going to make a difference. But the reality is that if you really get to delve into what's happening in that millennial and centennial marketplace, there is a very strong underlying ethos value proposition that says, I need to feel like I am a part of something. This individualness, this rugged, self-made person thing that kind of built the previous generation is not in any way what motivates where the world is headed. And if we don't embrace that, so then we're not learning and evolving and being able to grow into that. So what do I see in the work we do is I see people who say, I want to collaborate with people that care about similar things that I care about. I want to address some big world problems. And even though I may be small, I can be a part of something really, really big by coming together with lots of other people. And if I can get my companies and brands that care about this involved, and if I can deal with the celebrities and the athletes that care about this as well, and we come together as a meaningful group of people who care deeply, then we can really start to change the world. We had a client who had a $2 billion foundation, and they wanted to address one specific issue. And they wanted us to run some scenarios to see how could they affect that issue. And it was an issue that $2 billion just didn't touch, right? And money alone isn't going to change our planet, save the environment. It's not going to feed the hungry and educate those that are uneducated. First, we have to win over hearts and minds. We have to create communities of people that really want to come together around those things. And that's just teams on steroids, right? So in a microcosm, when I'm leading a team and my entire world is multiple teams, if I'm the team leader, which oftentimes I'm blessed to be, my first goal is to make sure that the needs of the team are met and understanding what those needs are. So are those needs identity? Of course, there's a financial aspect potentially, and there's a career development aspect of that. But what are the other layers that need to be met? And I don't wait for them to ask me how to get those met. I show them how we're going to do that together. And once everybody understands how their individual needs are met, whether articulated or inarticulated, now I have the opportunity to get everybody around that same shared reality, not only for what we can accomplish, but really in feeling altruistic about what we're doing forward. I think that's true on the global macrocosm as well. I think that we have a generation ready to do everything they can, but they find their identity in each other. It's not a self-driven identity. They find their identity through coming together through whether that's social media, whether that's going to be Web3, however that's done. That's how we are able to create that collaboration.
I really like this concept of communities are really just teams on steroids.
Yeah.
That's a very positive way to frame it. And, you touch rightly on millennials and centennials as people that it's not that they follow the crowd, they place a lot of weight in the viewpoint of the crowd, almost over and above the authority of a traditional figure like a doctor or a professor or whatever it might be. Naturally, because they've grown up in a world where they've got all that information available. So harnessing those teams, and I guess what we're saying is that people are able to exist in concurrent teams around different, purposes.
Absolutely.
But harnessing them in a positive way could be really, really powerful in driving good change. What would you say? Sorry, you go, Robbie.
No, I was going to say, and in that is the value of influencers and athletes and celebrities, because now we have the digital community. Now we need the amplifier. And what we find in our work with celebrities and athletes, is that they also authentically have a need to be something beyond just the role they have in their celebritydom or in their influence. And so they can take that spotlight that's shining on them and they choose to shine that on the cause. And that's sort of the trifecta. We have the corporates that are wanting to accomplish this. We have this amplifier of the spotlight, and then we can build a really robust community of individuals around that. And then we can start to change some big world problems. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
No, that's super cool. And I love threes. So the fact that you're bringing those individuals in to play a key role on the team is that kind of goes back to your theme earlier on good team leadership. And team leadership becomes fairly democratized, really. It's not just the CEO or the figurehead of any given community or team on steroids. There's now this opportunity to bring team members in from all sorts of corners of the community. So that's pretty cool. I think I think when you look at the role of these celebrities and you talked about where wealth meets impact, some of these wealthier families that have been very successful, wealthier corporations that have got pretty healthy balance sheets to leverage through their foundations or through their for-profit activities. It's a unique time in the sense that we bring them in to be in a project, but they don't have to design the project for themselves. You can connect them with the new concept or the movement that is going to drive an outcome for them. We came across a group just recently called The Unconnected, a young lady called Mia Thompson, who we hope to have on as a guest in the future. And they're doing a lot of work around bringing internet connectivity to marginalized communities, whether that's women in a town in Uganda or students in Indonesia or senior citizens in a small Mexican town. Just the power of technology in bringing those people into the world and giving them more opportunity to access services, but also to do good. Because let's be honest, if you've got that connectivity, you can be part of doing good. And I think that begins to fuel a lot of it fuels a lot of fabric in teams when teams know that they're doing good, and when you've got these companies coming behind these initiatives to help bring internet or cellular service to these areas. That's pretty powerful. Where do you see right now some of the bigger emerging themes, particularly coming out of COVID, when you're working on some of these impact projects? Are there key focuses that you think are going to drive more teamwork, but more opportunity, going back to your earlier comment, for people with diverse backgrounds to be around the table sharing their perspective? What do you see as the big areas of opportunity?
Yeah, I think, America was founded on families, and never before has family been more central or important in where we go moving forward. So we find a lot of our projects that we are helping to incubate and to grow are really in one way or another focused around preserving and enhancing the family and the family unit. And it's the family as you define it, right? But it's that ability, and families are really nothing more than high functioning teams as well, right? You could have it's if you're
or low functioning teams
or low functioning teams
which need help. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so again, it's where do you fit in that hierarchy? Where do you fit in that environment? How is your voice heard? How are you seen? Right. All these things are the same. How do you grow? How do you support the others? What are the values of the loyalty that you have in your family and the trustworthiness? The same exact dynamic that I find that we have in teams as well. So, I would say, a mutual friend of ours often quotes a study that says that the next generation that is growing up today will either become the most compassionate or the most brutal generation in history, depending on how they learn to process their pain. And so I find the projects that speak to me the most, and there's many ways that we do that, focus on families, and primarily on families that can influence their neighborhoods, their children. I'll give you an example of a really cool project that I thought brought technology innovation together with a really unique world need. So there's a company called PaveGen, and PaveGen created these really interesting tiles that when you step on them, they take kinetic energy and they turn it into actual energy that can do things like run, water filtration systems and things of those nature. And so they teamed with a big company that is here in the US, a Fortune 500, and they created these playgrounds out in developing countries where the youth didn't have a lot of opportunity and family structures needed to help be strengthened as well. These are kids that had seen a lot of war. They had seen a lot of brutality and horrific things, war-torn areas. And so what they did was they created these PaveGen playgrounds. What they did then was they took these kind of like Fitbit watches, but unique to this organization, and they gave these kids these watches. And then they had coaches come, because sport and play and the opportunity to volunteer and to coach kids is always a great way to be involved and to help grow. And these kids would play on these playgrounds and they would get exercise. It would be healthy for them. They would get coaching. They'd learn teamwork and coming together on the playground, which is such an important part of life. And also, they would get credit for the amount of energy they created through their activity. And so when they ran and played in all these things, they were accrued. They got the sense of self-confidence and the sense of purpose with a big P, because they knew their efforts were actually creating the clean water for their families back home while they were playing. And they helped the kids understand to what level their activity did that as well. The points then turned into dollars that they could use for necessities they had or things that they wanted. And on a 10-to-1 basis, they offered them scholarships into educational opportunities so that they weren't getting a handout for education. They were getting a hand up. They earned it.
Yes.
And we just about 2 years ago put the first PaveGen playground at the King Center in Atlanta. And there's currently a very large stadium looking to put it in and power the entire stadium on game day by people who are in the stadium, right, walking around doing what they would do anyway. So it's that kind of innovation where you can't have a PaveGen and have one leader who is just, this wonderful billionaire jump up and down on it all day long. It's not going to solve the problem, right? You need the kids. You need to integrate. You need to have the stadium. You need to have, and then all of that which comes out. So I find now projects that we work on, they're very rarely one-dimensional in the problems they solve. The same action, the same activity, the same dollar can do the work of $5 or $6 or $10, because we can, with the ingenuity of the people around the table, can really start to solve some problems that almost on a cascading, pebble effect, right? With the ripple that is able to continue to change the world.
I love the family element, because I think it is a unit where you can start to make a change. And let's be honest, there are a lot of families that exist today where the youth coming out of that family have more opportunity to create wealth for that family or security or comfort than necessarily their parents, because we're living in a technological evolution which allows them to come in and upskill very quickly, where perhaps some of their parents or aunts or uncles or grandparents that are supporting them don't have. So it's both great muscle memory for the kids to be able to participate in something that helps their family and other families in their network, but it could also be used to bring, like you mentioned with the PaveGen concept, more kids up into education and career pathways. So there's just a huge multiplier effect by starting at that level.
Yeah, and it just has so many opportunities. There's another an example that I was going to share with you. We did a project in Minneapolis, and so we often work with NFL players and the homegrown NFL players who come back and they do things for the kids. And these NFL players on the Vikings wanted to do a sports clinic with their kids in the community, mentorship, leadership, what it means to be a person, what it means to live with integrity. But one of the players decided that he wanted to also try to create educational opportunities for the kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we reached out to Microsoft, and we didn't go through their corporate social responsibility unit, but there's a group in Microsoft called LEAP, and LEAP is directly under the engineering unit, right? And they have a strong mandate to try to help educate people in coding and the ability to then learn how to get a job. And Microsoft creates a lot of that for people who are either in the military, people who were staying home with a child maybe, and they were out of the workforce and to get retrained. So we called them up. They were really excited. They flew down and they brought people, not from their corporate social responsibility team, but they brought people who were actually coders, who were in the sleep department, from their technical department, and the NFL players. And we did a whole week long. Half a day was dealing with the getting the kids on the field with the NFL players. And then the second half of the day was actually learning coding. And each kid got a Microsoft Surface. And if they finished the week, they got to keep the Microsoft Surface. And
that's pretty real.
Now listen to this. If they followed along and then they did additional educational opportunities on the Surface, then they got the opportunity to get a certificate and then to work in the local Microsoft store. And if they finished the internship at the Microsoft store, they got a scholarship that paid for them to go and to get further education and then eventually be able to work at Microsoft. And now that grew into a 13-city initiative, and it's had tremendous impact. So again, Microsoft is engaging their employees who want to give back in their areas of expertise where they're really good. The NFL players want to also help these kids and condition them and get them excited about education. And these are all kids that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And then we did a wraparound service with some local organizations. So these kids also had a case worker that followed them that wasn't just about this, but if you're going home to a domestic abuse situation, God forbid, or you're going to other things, how do we help you there? So those are the kind of projects that we're very blessed to work on.
I've got to say the tech pathways, we both just touched on it.
Yeah.
There's a lower barrier to entry there too. And the fact that Microsoft, as you said, they've been able to phase it through the certificate and then working in the store, that's something that it takes a big company to be able to do. But we're not far away from seeing groups of companies being able to deliver a similar outcome, particularly as they partner with new technologies. There is a technology that we're working with right now, which is a cloud-based peer-to-peer coding school that starts with a game on your cell phone. So it's literally just one of those coding games. And if you can go through the full hour and a half, you're probably, that 1 in 10 young person that may be able to become a full stack developer, which is really interesting because we're now at no cost putting games out in the community that allow children to develop some muscle memory, or young people because they may be transition age youth, 18 to 24.
Sure.
But something that's lightweight, and if you can add in the incentives and the near-term gratification, I guess, going back to Maslow's hierarchy, if you can give them something that helps today, that encourages the young person to come back, you can really move a lot of people into having more hope for their opportunities, out there.
Absolutely.
When do you see, in those projects, you mentioned perhaps the social worker or caseworker who's helping them deal with problems, but where do you see the ability to remove some of those challenges, whether it's accommodation, whether it's security? Is there much out there that you see where companies are doing a great job to provide even childcare for some people is a barrier to being able to get into the workforce? Do you see many good local initiatives in those areas to help people kind of be free to come to work?
Yeah, several of them. In fact, we even have a company that it's a really unique company, and they have removed the background checks on new employees. Uh-huh. And it's in there. They run a big bakery and a big, very large industrial complex. And they meet people, and they just base their movement forward on the impression that they make, who they are, allowing people to give up on sort of old mistakes as well, which I found to be such a wonderful leap forward into believing in the human condition and the ability for people to grow and not be defined by maybe their actions or mistakes, shortcomings or foibles of the past. And their data shows that they're having a wonderful retention of those employees and growth. So that's an area that I see opening those doors. And I also see a lot of companies locally that are no longer only bringing on entry level or even further employees based on pedigree of their educational background, where there's a lot of interest in where do you want to go? What are your skill sets? What are your character? And I think that opens a lot of doors as well. And big companies and small companies alike. Larger companies obviously have this opportunity to use their largesse in meaningful ways. And again, seismic shift in the way companies are approaching a lot of things that they do today. A friend of mine was saying that, they don't have a choice if they want to get to the marketplace, then they want to get that $3 trillion in millennial centennial spend. They have to articulate purpose. And so they're being kind of forced to do this. And maybe it's authentic or maybe it's just getting to the market. I don't think that's the case. I think for the longest time, the market demanded one thing from a company: quarterly earnings, quarterly earning reports. Did you get that extra 3 cents on your shares? You're good. You didn't, the CEO was out. And so when we as a planet, as a community, demand certain things from the company, so to survive, the company would do that. I find that corporate leaders are now so relieved that the demands are more than just earnings. The demands are those other, what are you doing for the planet? What are you doing for grandchildren? What are you doing to make workers able to be comfortable in that workspace? And so I don't know that they're actually chasing it in an inauthentic way. I think they feel relieved that they can bring the best of themselves. Same thing. People want to be altruistic if you remove the barriers to being so. And so I think the market has created an opening for these companies to do tremendous things and create that collaborative experience, right, for everybody internally and externally.
And in a market as tight as this labor market is, that's critical. I mean, it becomes an essential feature of an organization that you can let people come and be a part of the big P and exert, some velocity behind their small p purpose, wherever that is. Otherwise, they're just not going to be interested. I like that statement that you made. Or I'm going to paraphrase it, but let them sort of be the person who they want to be. Let them bring themselves to work. That is definitely a revolution that's happening in the workplace right now, and we see a lot of companies doing some cool stuff to ask their employees, who are you? What's important to you? How can I, as an employer, support you in those kind of goals or objectives that you're setting, for yourself outside of work?
Yeah. And to your earlier point, the data is showing that this is enhancing innovation. It's enhancing productivity. It's enhancing work culture. And so the things that people were so afraid of, and maybe the door opening was COVID, because, for the longest time, companies said, you got to show up, you got to clock in, you got to, we got to know where you are. How are you using your time? We're going to monitor, your logins. We're going to monitor when you walk to the building, when you use your keypad to go from one place to the other, because it's that old sort of, factory mentality. We had no choice under COVID. We had to do things totally differently. And we were shocked because people rose to the occasion. And maybe that was part of the breaking of the mold, that the silver lining, if there was one.
Musk, I think I use one of his quotes on a regular basis, made a quote that humans are underrated. And I think it was in the context of saying, I'm automating a lot of things in my plants, in my factories, but there's still these amazing things that people can do if you invite them in to be, their best selves. Yeah. And I think that's where you're sort of pointing towards, is that the old ways of forming teams and allowing teams to play, the playing field was very constrained. In fact, I think one of my very first interviews in life, I went home to Australia. I'm a surfer, so I had a good tan going. And one of my friends said, when they ask, about your tan because you've got this big white line across your neck from your wetsuit. Explain that you're a surf lifesaver. Don't tell them you're a surfer because they don't like surfers. Surfers have a bad rap in the city of Brisbane, which is crazy that you're but that was kind of late 90s, early 2000s. That's how some people were thinking. And I think that by having different people from different backgrounds, you're going to get the perspective, but the game is changing so fast. I know Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game. You can't play for the size of the field or the goals or the equipment, whether it's hockey sticks or rollerblades or whatever you're using, because the game's going to keep changing. So you kind of need those people to come in and almost help you pick what game you should play as a business, whether that's at a departmental level or a corporate level, whether it has manifestations in your supply chain or your community partnerships. It's all changing.
And the fear of too diverse is that it creates friction, because the less homogenous a group is, then if people are really engaged in that team meeting, then you're going to get some strong opinions, and that will create friction. And I don't want to say fighting, but I want to say healthy discord will be a part of that. So I think a part of a healthy team structure is allowing people to be vocal because they are passionate. You want their passion, but then also learning how to kind of guide that process through being able to stand in that fire, if you will, to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, to allow uncertainty to not be seen as insecurity. And we can be uncertain as a team for a beat or two as we allow things to come together. And so, in relationships, they say, when a couple is still fighting, there's hope. It's when they stop fighting that you got a problem, right? Because then there's resignation.
You're not wrong.
Right? Then you got the great silence. And that happens people on teams. I was at a meeting this morning, and the CEO just laid down the law and just said, no, I don't care. I don't care what we're doing this. And at that moment, I watched everybody around just kind of, that's not my company. It was a company I was doing some consulting for. They just they shut down. And then later I had an opportunity to talk to the CEO and say, hey, let's have a conversation, because you just shut you're not going to get any argument. They're going to do what you've asked them to do, but you're not going to get innovation. You're not going to get passion. You're not going to get excitement. So he said, how else do I do it? I do have to make a decision. Let's work on that, because there's ways to make decisions that aren't draconian.
And there's ways to bring the team in. One of my favorite coaches, he's actually here in California, Craig Weber. He's written a book called Conversational Capacity. He talks about the sweet spot. He talks about you're either winning or minimizing. If you're winning, you're coming in, you don't care what the people think, and you just shut them down and you say, we're doing this. And if you're minimizing, you might have either a great idea, or it might not be innovation. You might have visibility towards saving the company or its customers from a tragic event. Might be a safety issue. And you don't speak up because you don't want to put your job at risk or be socially reprimanded for being the squeaky wheel. And so he talks about strategies that allow teams to stay in the sweet spot, stay in the middle. And there's a range of really easy exercises. It's just like, hey, if you're the boss, ask the team to walk out of the room, ask the team to brainstorm the 3 things that we're missing, and come back in and ask ask someone to present anonymously what the team came up. Don't say Bobby over here said that we're missing this. So there's ways to make it safe and to kind of flex that muscle too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is interesting. We've talked a lot today about teams. I made a ton of notes here, Robbie. That shared reality, the perspective. I'm going to say it wrong again. It's perspective and capacity. Perspicacity.
There you go.
We talked about that. We talked about communities as kind of teams on steroids, and I like what you said about the role of companies, of groups of people sort of amplifying key messages that are important. But it does seem like we're kind of finishing up here on this fuel, which is we all need to get a lot more comfortable with conflict. We've all got to get a lot more comfortable with hearing the perspectives of others and processing those perspectives in a way that we can actually, walk away with a better outcome. I think that's in all of these initiatives. That's a really key element that'll fuel progress.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So as you go forwards, maybe as a closing note, what are you most excited about personally impacting? You go forward 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. What's most important for you to be out there doing right now?
So it's a great question. Wow. So I would say that the more mature that I get, the more I realize that the skill sets that I have and continue to build allow me to help others to become those leaders of teams, to be able to have impact in significant and meaningful ways. So I always try to reframe my experience by saying it's not about me, but it's up to me. When it's about me, I get marginalized, I get fearful, I get egotistical, or I get entrenched, right? But it's not about me. If it's my opportunity to be a catalyst, to be a lever, to be the enhancing part of that thing. So then I get very excited and very jazzed. So we run a company called Giving, which is basically a digital community of purpose. We help corporates create that digital nonprofit at an arm's distance relationship that can have tremendous impact in that space. For a long time, it was about giving things. I give money. But what we find now, which is really moving communities of purpose, and in my opinion, corporations are simply communities of purpose with various stakeholders and constituents. But we're finding very, very much so that when there is a gathering of the minds, when there is an opportunity to have an impact where I can learn something, improve myself, do something, not just give, but actually roll up my sleeves and be involved and bring my skills to that opportunity, and then give from my dollars as well, and then to give that charitable piece. That is really what is moving individuals and people. And so, we're running dozens of projects in various countries simultaneously. We have a really big one going on in Colombia right now. We're about to launch a $100 million Ukrainian refugee concert that will be held in Warsaw for the refugees there, but also worldwide, with lots of activations to raise that $100 million. And so we're helping use this platform, this know-how, this amplifier effect to help create many, many different teams, communities, families that can impact the world around. And if I can do that every day for the rest of my life, I will have a very blessed, fulfilled life to live.
It's very rewarding. So if people want to find you and find Giving and participate, what's the best way for them to connect?
Well, you can reach out to GVNGorg. Giving is spelled without any of the vowels because there are no I's in giving. It is a team team sport. That wasn't the reason they named it that, but that's what I say. So, that's a part of it. And I'm always happy. I'm always happy to lend a helping hand to anybody who's trying to accomplish, or they can reach out to me on my LinkedIn or through you.
Great. No, that's
fantastic,
Robbie. Well, I've loved the conversation and, continue to really enjoy our opportunities to keep partnering together. So
me too, Dane.
Look forward to catching up with you soon.
Okay. Thank you.